Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to meet with President Trump in D.C. this week to discuss negotiations with Iran. Netanyahu's office says in a statement, quote, "The Prime Minister believes that any negotiations must include limiting ballistic missiles and ending support for the Iranian axis." On Friday, Iran's foreign minister said talks between the U.S. and Iran and Oman were off to a very good start. Now he's reiterating that Tehran will only discuss the nuclear program in the talks with the U.S. and won't accept zero enrichment. Foreign correspondent Marcus Moore and ABC News national security and defense analyst Mick Mulroy are here for more on that. Marcus, Netanyahu is planning to meet with Trump on Wednesday. What is the prime minister hoping to get out of that meeting?
Well, Diane, first, there really does seem to be a great deal of urgency. I mean, this is a meeting that was supposed to take place next week, but it has been pushed up to this week ahead of the potential next round of talks on a new Iran nuclear deal. And Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to discuss Iran, specifically the country's ballistic missile program. They see those missiles as a threat to their security and believe, as you noted, that there should be restrictions on missile production as part of any new deal. And Diane, Iran's nuclear program was at the heart of the 12-day war when the U.S. carried out strikes on a number of Iranian nuclear facilities. And as you know, looming over all of this right now is the threat of another U.S. strike on Iran.
Mick, the head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization reportedly says diluting the country's stockpile of 60% enriched uranium could be possible if all sanctions are lifted. How big of a deal is that? And would that be enough for the U.S. and Iran to come to an agreement?
So, Diane, it would be a big deal, right? So they have around 441 kilograms of enriched uranium, up to 60%. So far beyond what's needed for any civilian use. There's always been discussions about potentially taking this to a third country like Russia or Turkey, where the Iranians obviously wouldn't have access to it. But whether it would be enough for the U.S. is unclear, because Secretary Rubio essentially said what Israel said, which is that any agreement needs to include at least some kind of restrictions on Iranian ballistic missile programs and their support to terrorist organizations, proxy forces, if you will, like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. That might be a maximalist position simply going into these agreements, but it's unclear. If that is required, then it's unlikely that we'll get there based on what the Iranians have said.
And Mick, Iran says inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency have visited nuclear sites not damaged during the 12-day war with Israel and the U.S. They also say inspectors will visit more facilities in the coming days. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's Iranian attempt to show that they're willing to do the needful to make this a viable agreement. It has to be, I think, for political reasons, more stringent than the JCPOA that the first Trump administration pulled out of. But I think the Iranians are willing to do that. It's really going to come down to whether the U.S. will accept a nuclear weapons agreement alone, or whether we'll really require all these other issues to be wrapped into it. If that's the case, it's hard to see how we'll get there, and it certainly will require a lot of effort and a lot of time to even get close to that.
So, Marcus, what are you watching for next?
Well, we'll wait to see what happens of any potential new meeting, Diane. And I think it's also notable that we're talking about all of this on the day that marks 1 month since the Iranian regime's violent crackdown on unrest in the country. We know that about 7,000 people were killed. Of that, more than 6,400 were protesters. And Diane, more than 11,000 death cases are under review as I talk to you now. That's according to the human rights activist group. And there's a large part of the population there that, as we talk about the negotiations on a potential new Iran nuclear deal, there are a number of people in Iran who are critical of the U.S., saying that they should not be negotiating with this current regime.
Marcus Moore, Mick Mulroy, thank you.